Another aspect that I have not touched on, but which I think is very important, is in the early days, we might need a particular instrument, a finger touch type of product, which you couldn't get anywhere. And then we had Dan de Wet, who made it for us. He was an interesting person. He sat in his little room at almost the cellar, where he manufactured whatever we needed for assessing either an individual or assessing groups of individuals. We would tell him, this is what we need, and he would develop it. He, amongst others, also assisted when we decided, or when Dr. Bishewel suggested, that we might need to look at predetermined motion time standards, which means that in order to determine the price of a product, you have to determine how long will it take to make it, apart from the cost of the raw material. For that we had two benches. We had a bench made in which you could, you had to place certain forms. If you had, for instance, a square, then you had to pick up the square and you had to put it into the form there. And then you had to take another form and have to put it in another spot. And the moment you put it in, it would electronically indicate, as you pick this up, there's an electronic indication, this is the time, and when you fit it there, that is the time it was fitted there, which again assisted in identifying how long does it take. It's not a question of just taking and putting, it's a question of taking, turning and putting in. And that again was used for assisting in training, for instance, people in factories where they would take, let us say, putting bottles into cardboard boxes, assisting in the training, assisting in the developing of new techniques that could ensure that the people would function at the top of their. So in effect, the work at the NIPR was one of trying to identify where the needs are, asking the client, now, what are your needs? And then in cooperation with the client, determining how best can we address it. But it was never done in isolation. We would always have meetings together where your psychological testing groups would share with us, and where we could go to the statistic department and where we could go to the EEG department, and they would assist us. It was a group cooperative effort within the NIPR. Now, that culture was created by Dr. Bishewel, but it was taken further by Dawie Gous. Dawie Gous, who at a certain stage had also worked at the NIPR. But Dawie Gous was the one who said, you've got to go up the street and get work. So that made us, as applied divisions, where we have to go and get the jobs. With that, the NIPR grew, and the next director that we had was Dawie Forster, and his absolute skill was the fact that the organization had grown, and now suddenly we needed more order and structure. It wasn't just a free-for-all. You couldn't just give beer for people to do EEG research. There had to be some formalization of it. So all of them had a particular value in the creation of the NIPR. I think the most important aspect for me in the almost 40 years that I worked there was the fact that it was a place where you were expected to keep abreast of the theoretical aspects in psychology, particularly in your own discipline then, but theoretical, but to be able to read between the lines where are possibilities for innovation, and where, if the client comes, that you will be able to present to the client possibilities, and through dialogue, decide this is what needs to be done. And I think that led to the fact that the NIPR became an institute seen as of value, particularly because its name is personnel research within the field of industrial psychology. It was nationally and internationally because, again, we were expected to produce reports. We were expected to attend international conferences. We were expected to publish research reports. It was not a question of you do research and you sit in your office. You do research practically, you come back, you work, you publish it, and then go further.